Grandma, if Grandpa gave you this house, why does Mom keep saying you have 30 days to move out? My grandson Noah asked the question from the attic ladder, holding one of my old wedding letters between two fingers as if it had suddenly become evidence. For a moment, the whole house went still. The kind of stillness that comes before a summer storm in Iowa, when even the birds seem to know something is about to break. I was standing at the bottom of the stairs with a cardboard box in my arms, sorting through 48 years of photographs, Christmas ornaments, and folded tablecloths that still smelled faintly of cedar. Above me, dust floated in the pale afternoon light coming through the attic window. Noah was 16, tall and all elbows, with his grandfather's serious gray eyes. He had gone upstairs to help me find the old quilt Thomas's mother made for our wedding. Instead, he had found the cedar box I thought was buried behind winter coats and forgotten suitcases. Inside were the letters Thomas wrote me before we married, back when we were young enough to believe love alone could protect a person from anything. Claire, my daughter-in-law, stood near the hallway with a roll of packing tape in her hand. Her smile did not disappear. That was what frightened me. It only tightened. "Noah," she said softly, too softly, "that is private. Bring it down." My son Daniel looked at the floor. He did not ask what letter Noah had found. He did not look surprised. He looked tired, as if the question had arrived earlier than expected. I set the box down slowly. My hands were not shaking yet, but something inside me had shifted, like a lock turning after years of rust. "Read it again," I said. Noah swallowed and looked from his mother to me. Then he lowered his eyes to the yellowed paper. "My dearest Ellie," he read, his young voice careful, "no matter what happens in this life, the house on Hawthorne Lane will always be your home. I built it for us, but I leave it for you. No one, not even our own blood, should ever make you feel like a guest beneath this roof." The words moved through the hallway like Thomas himself had stepped back into the house. Claire reached for the letter then, quick and sharp. "Enough," she said. I looked at her hand, then at Daniel's silence, and finally at my grandson's confused face. 30 days. That was what Noah had said. Not someday. Not eventually. 30 days. And in that instant, I understood that the little conversations Claire had been having about senior apartments were not suggestions. They were plans. For 6 years after Thomas passed, I told myself that change was just part of grief. A chair moved from one corner to another. A framed photograph taken down because Claire said the hallway looked too crowded. My sewing room slowly becoming a place where Daniel kept exercise equipment he barely used. None of it seemed worth arguing over at the time. I had spent most of my life making peace before anyone had to ask for it. That was what wives did in my generation. That was what mothers did. We swallowed small hurts so the table could stay quiet. At first, Claire was careful. She did not walk into my home and claim it all at once. She used softer words. Practical words. Helpful words. "Eleanor, let me handle the property taxes this year. It is too much paperwork for you. Eleanor, Daniel and I should keep the spare keys, just in case. Eleanor, you do not need to worry about the insurance forms. They are confusing even for younger people." Each sentence sounded like concern if you did not listen closely. I wanted to believe she cared. I wanted to believe Daniel was only overwhelmed, still grieving his father in that quiet way men sometimes do, hiding in work, nodding instead of talking. So I let them help. I let Claire organize the file cabinet in Thomas's study. I let her change the online passwords because she said everything had to be safer now. I let Daniel move the safe from our bedroom closet to the basement, where he said it would be less obvious. Then one morning I reached for Thomas's old navy cardigan on the hook by the back door, and it was gone. Claire had donated it with 3 garbage bags of things nobody used anymore. Nobody. That was the word that stayed with me. Not me. Not the woman who still pressed her face against that worn wool sleeve when the house felt too empty. Nobody. Little by little, Hawthorne Lane stopped feeling like the home Thomas and I had built. The kitchen cabinets were rearranged, so I had to ask where my own measuring cups were. The guest room became Claire's office. The good china was packed away because she said it was outdated. Even the rose bushes Thomas planted beside the porch were cut back until they looked like dry sticks. I did not complain. I paid for my own prescriptions. I patched my own winter coat. I drove my 12-year-old Buick to the grocery store and clipped coupons at the kitchen table while Claire planned vacations to Arizona and Florida. I never envied them. I only wondered when I had become someone they managed instead of someone they loved. That night, after everyone left the hallway and pretended the attic had only given us a dusty box of memories, I sat alone at my kitchen table with Noah's photograph glowing on my phone. He had taken it quickly, before Claire snatched the envelope away, and the picture was not perfect. The corner of his thumb covered part of Thomas's writing. The attic light had made the paper look more yellow than it truly was. But 3 phrases were clear enough to make my breath slow down: living trust, medical account, and undue pressure clause. I read those words until they stopped looking like words and started looking like a door. Thomas had never been a careless man. He labeled nails in coffee cans. He kept warranty papers for toasters we had thrown out 20 years earlier. He wrote the date on every family photograph, even the blurry ones. If he had written those phrases in a letter to me, then somewhere there were documents that matched them. For 6 years, Claire had made me feel foolish for asking about paperwork. She had smiled gently and said, "Eleanor, Thomas handled things the old-fashioned way." There was not much to sort out. I had believed her because grief makes a person tired in places sleep cannot reach. I had believed her because Daniel stood beside her and said nothing. But now I looked at the small bright screen and felt something I had not felt in years. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity. I opened the drawer beside the sink where I kept old address books and birthday candles. In the back, under a stack of expired coupons, I found the little leather notebook Thomas used for important numbers. Most of the ink had faded, but one name was still there in his careful block letters: Martin Hale, attorney, downtown Cedar Falls. I remembered Martin. He had come to Thomas's service in a gray suit and stood near the back of the church. Claire told me later that he had already sent everything necessary, and there was no reason to bother him. At the time, I was too numb to wonder why a lawyer would come to a funeral and never speak privately to the widow. I placed the notebook beside Noah's photograph. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator humming and the soft tick of the clock Thomas had repaired twice instead of replacing. I did not call Martin that night. Older women learn patience the hard way. Instead, I wrote down every phrase from the photograph on a yellow legal pad. Then I added dates I remembered: the hospital stay, the property tax notice, the day Claire changed the locks, the afternoon Daniel moved the safe. By midnight, the page was full. By 1 in the morning, I understood that I was not confused. I had been kept in the dark. The next morning, I called Martin Hale at exactly 9:15, after the bank opened and after Claire usually left for her Pilates class on Main Street. My voice sounded ordinary when I gave my name to the receptionist, but my left hand was pressed flat against the kitchen table, holding me steady. There was a pause on the line, then a click, then a man's voice I had not heard in 6 years. "Eleanor," Martin said quietly. He did not sound surprised. That unsettled me more than if he had. "Mr. Hale, I found something in Thomas's letters," I said. "A reference to a trust. And an undue pressure clause." The silence that followed was long enough for me to hear the furnace come on in the basement. Then Martin exhaled. "I was hoping you would call me before it came to that." I looked toward the hallway, toward the stairs that led up to the attic, and felt the house listening with me. "Before what came to what?" I asked. His voice changed then, not colder, but more careful. The voice of a man stepping around broken glass. "Thomas asked me to keep a duplicate file in my office. He was concerned that, after his passing, certain people might make decisions for you instead of with you." I closed my eyes. Certain people. Even from the grave, Thomas had been trying to be gentle. "Claire told me everything was handled," I said. "Daniel said the same." "I know," Martin replied. "I sent 2 letters requesting a private meeting with you after the funeral. Both were returned with notes saying you were not emotionally well enough to discuss legal matters." I opened my eyes slowly. The kitchen clock ticked above the stove. The same clock Thomas had bought at a farm auction for $5 and carried home like treasure. "I never saw those letters," I said. "I suspected you had not." There was no triumph in his voice. Only sadness, which somehow made it worse. Martin asked if I could come to his office that afternoon. I told him I could drive myself. He offered to send someone. I said no. I had spent too many years letting other people decide when I needed help. At 2 o'clock, I parked my old Buick beside the courthouse square and walked into his building wearing my navy coat and the pearl earrings Thomas gave me on our 30th anniversary. Martin was older than I remembered, thinner, with white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He did not greet me like a fragile widow. He stood, shook my hand, and placed a thick folder on the desk between us. "Your husband was a gentle man, Eleanor," he said. "But he was not a careless one." Then he opened the folder, and for the first time in 6 years, I began to see the shape of what had been taken from me. Martin turned the folder toward me, but he did not rush. He let me put on my reading glasses. He let me touch the first page before I read it, as if he understood that paper can carry grief the same way fabric can carry perfume. Across the top were the words Whitmore Family Living Trust, dated 8 months before Thomas passed. My name was not in the margins. It was not an afterthought. It was everywhere. Primary beneficiary. Lifetime resident. Sole authority regarding the Hawthorne Lane property during her natural life. I read each phrase slowly, my lips moving without sound. Martin waited until I looked up. "Thomas wanted you protected in 3 ways," he said. "The house, the medical account, and the emergency clause." He explained that the house was never meant to be sold while I was alive unless I chose it freely, in writing, with my own attorney present. The medical account had been funded to cover prescriptions, appointments, home repairs related to safety, and basic living support. It was not enormous, but it was enough that I should never have been choosing between a prescription refill and fixing the Buick's heater. I folded my hands in my lap because they had started to tremble. Not from weakness. From arithmetic. 6 winters. 6 years of coupon clipping. 6 years of Claire telling me there was not much left after the funeral. "Where did it go?" I asked. Martin's jaw tightened. He slid another page across the desk. "That is what worries me." It was a document labeled Property Transfer Acknowledgement. My name appeared at the bottom in blue ink, or something that was supposed to look like my name. Eleanor Ruth Whitmore. I stared at the signature. At first, it seemed close enough to fool someone who had only seen my handwriting on Christmas cards. But I knew my own hand. I knew the small loop I always made in the W, the way the final E in Eleanor leaned slightly forward. This signature was too smooth. Too careful. Like someone drawing a picture of my name instead of writing it. Then I saw the date. March 14th. The room narrowed. The courthouse square outside the window blurred into patches of gray and brick. "I was in the hospital that day," I said. "I remember because Noah brought me a shamrock cookie from the cafeteria, even though St. Patrick's Day was still 3 days away." Martin's eyes sharpened. "Are you certain?" "I had a blood pressure episode. Daniel signed me in at Mercy Cedar Falls before lunch. Claire came later with flowers. I could still see them. White lilies in a glass vase. Too fragrant for a hospital room. I had thanked her. While, somewhere else, my name was being used to move my life out from under me." Martin wrote something on his legal pad. "Then we get the hospital records," he said. I looked again at the false signature and felt a calm so cold it almost frightened me. Claire had not just hidden Thomas's protection. She had counted on me never looking for it. I drove home from Martin's office with both hands on the steering wheel, though the afternoon was clear and the streets were dry. Cedar Falls looked the same as it always had in late March, bare trees along the sidewalks, pickup trucks parked outside the hardware store, flags moving gently in front of the courthouse. But I felt as if I had returned from another country, one where the laws of my own life had been rewritten while I was not looking. I did not tell Daniel I had seen Martin. I did not call Noah, though I wanted to thank him for taking that photograph. I walked into the house on Hawthorne Lane through the back door, hung my navy coat on the hook where Thomas's cardigan used to be, and listened. Claire was in the dining room, speaking in the bright, polished voice she used with people she wanted to impress. "The bones of the house are wonderful," she said. "Original woodwork, updated plumbing, and the neighborhood is exactly what buyers want." We just need to get Eleanor settled before summer. I stood still in the mudroom, my purse still on my arm. Another woman answered, cheerful and quick. A realtor. I could hear her heels crossing the hardwood floor Thomas had sanded by hand in 1982. And she is comfortable with selling? The realtor asked. Claire laughed softly, not unkindly, which made it worse. She will be. Eleanor does not like conflict. Daniel and I have been handling things for years. There it was. Not hidden in legal language. Not disguised as concern. Just the truth, spoken casually in my dining room. Eleanor does not like conflict. She was not entirely wrong. I had spent decades choosing silence because I thought silence protected love. I had let Daniel avoid hard conversations because I remembered him as a little boy with scraped knees and a cowlick that would not stay down. I had let Claire move my memories into boxes because I did not want Noah growing up in a house full of tension. But standing there with Martin's folder still warm under my arm, I understood something Thomas must have understood before me. Peace without respect is only surrender with nicer curtains. I reached into my purse and opened the voice recorder on my phone. My thumb hovered over the red button for 1 second. Then I pressed it. Claire continued, once she signs the senior apartment agreement, we can list quickly. There is no reason to drag this out. The realtor murmured something about market timing. Claire replied, exactly. Noah graduates in 2 years, and we want to be in Des Moines before then. This house is too valuable to waste on one elderly woman rattling around alone. I looked down at my shoes. There was a thin line of mud along the edge from Martin's parking lot. I thought about wiping it before stepping inside. Then I changed my mind. This was my house. I walked into the dining room with the mud still on my soles. I stepped into the dining room just as Claire was pointing toward the front windows, explaining how much brighter the room would look once the heavy drapes were gone. The realtor turned first, her smile professional and uncertain. Claire turned more slowly. For one brief second, before she arranged her face, I saw annoyance. Not guilt. Not shame. Annoyance, as if I had interrupted a meeting I had no right to attend. Eleanor, she said, smoothing her cream sweater, you are back early. I looked at the measuring tape on the table, the glossy folder with the realtor's logo, the little notes Claire had already made in blue ink. Paint entryway. Remove old furniture. Stage sunroom. Old furniture. That was Thomas's oak sideboard. The one he bought for me at an estate sale in Waterloo because I said it reminded me of my grandmother's house. I did not know we were having company, I said. My voice sounded calm enough that Claire relaxed a little. Just an informal consultation, she replied. Nothing to worry about. The realtor shifted her weight. I was told the family was considering listing the property later this spring. The family, I repeated. 2 words. Small words. They landed heavily. Between us. Claire's smile tightened again. Eleanor, we have discussed this. The house is too much for you, and the senior apartment community near Greenhill Road has openings. Daniel agrees it is time to be practical. She always used practical when she meant obedient. I set my purse on the sideboard and kept my phone inside it, still recording. Does Daniel also agree to showing the house without my permission? Claire glanced at the realtor, then lowered her voice in that careful way people use when they want witnesses to think they are being patient. You have been overwhelmed. We are trying to make this easier. Before I could answer, the front door opened and Noah came in, backpack over one shoulder, cheeks red from the March wind. He stopped when he saw the realtor. Then he looked at me, at Claire, and at the folder on the table. His expression changed. 16 is young, but not too young to recognize a lie wearing Sunday clothes. Are you selling Grandma's house? He asked. Claire turned sharply. Noah, go upstairs. He did not move. Dad said Grandma was thinking about it. Claire's mouth opened, but no sound came out fast enough. Noah looked straight at her. Did Dad know she never signed that paper? The realtor went very still. I did not speak. I wanted to hear what Claire would do with silence when it was finally pointed at her. She reached for composure and missed. This is not your concern, she said. Noah's eyes moved to me. Grandma, I heard them last night. Dad asked if the document would hold up if you got your own lawyer. Mom told him you would never do that. There are moments when a room changes shape without anything moving. Daniel's silence had already hurt me. But hearing that he had questioned the paper and still let the plan continue was a quieter kind of heartbreak. I touched the edge of Thomas's sideboard, feeling the old wood beneath my fingers. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I only looked at Claire and said, "Then I suppose it is a good thing I already did." The realtor left within 5 minutes, carrying her glossy folder against her chest and apologizing twice without looking directly at Claire. I did not blame her. She had walked into a family matter dressed as a business appointment and found the floor missing beneath her feet. Claire stood by the dining room table, one hand resting on the chair back, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light. Noah stayed near the doorway, still wearing his backpack, his face pale with the terrible understanding that adults can disappoint you quietly and still change your whole world. "Noah," Claire said, her voice thin, "go to your room." "No," I said. The word surprised all of us, maybe me most of all. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Claire turned toward me. "You are involving a child in legal issues he cannot understand." "He understood enough to tell the truth," I said. That was when Daniel arrived. He must have seen the realtor's car leaving, because he came in through the front door quickly, his work tie loosened, his eyes moving from Claire to Noah to me. "What happened?" he asked. Claire answered before anyone else could. "Your mother went to a lawyer." Daniel's face changed in a way I will never forget. Not shock. Fear. Small, immediate, and honest. I reached into my purse and took out the copied pages Martin had given me. I placed them on the dining room table one by one. The living trust. The medical account summary. The property transfer acknowledgement with the false version of my signature. Then I placed my hospital discharge papers beside them. March 14th, Mercy Cedar Falls, admitted at 11:28 in the morning, discharged the next afternoon. "This document says I signed away my authority over the house on March 14th, I said. "These records say I was in a hospital bed at that exact time." Daniel stared at the papers. Claire looked at him, waiting for him to become useful. For once, he did not. He sat down slowly, as if his niece had forgotten what they were for. "Mom," he whispered, "I thought you knew." It was a weak sentence. A little raft built from guilt. I let it drift past me. "No, Daniel. You hoped I would never ask." Claire's voice sharpened. "That is unfair. Everything we did was to simplify matters. You were grieving. You were forgetful. Daniel was trying to protect you." I opened my phone and played the recording from my purse. Her own voice filled the room, bright and casual, saying I would not fight it, that there was no reason to waste a valuable house on one elderly woman rattling around alone. Nobody moved while it played. Even the old clock seemed to tick more softly. When the recording ended, Martin Hale knocked once on the open front door and stepped inside with his briefcase. I had asked him to come at 4. Claire looked at him and finally went quiet. Martin placed one final document on the table. "This is a notice preserving Eleanor Whitmore's rights under the trust," he said. "No sale, transfer, or listing of this property may proceed." Then he looked at Daniel. "And there is another clause your father left behind." Daniel lifted his eyes. Claire's hand slipped from the chair back. I stood beside Thomas's sideboard, calm at last, while the room prepared to hear the part my husband had written for the day they pushed too far. Martin opened the trust document to a page marked with a yellow tab. His hands were steady, but I could see the sadness in the way he glanced at Daniel before reading. "Thomas added this provision himself," he said. I advised him that it was unusually specific, but he insisted. Claire folded her arms, trying to look offended instead of afraid. Daniel stared at the table as if the grain in the wood might rearrange itself into a rescue. Noah stood beside me now. Not behind his mother. Not beside his father. Beside me. Martin read slowly. "If Daniel Whitmore, or any spouse acting with his knowledge or benefit, attempts to pressure, mislead, coerce, or otherwise remove Eleanor Whitmore from the Hawthorne Lane residence against her free and informed choice, Daniel Whitmore's future interest in said residence shall be revoked and transferred to the Noah Whitmore Education and Housing Trust to become available upon Noah reaching 21 years of age." The words settled over the room one by one. I watched Claire understand them before Daniel did. Her face lost color in small stages, first around the mouth, then beneath the eyes. "That cannot be legal," she said. Martin closed the document halfway, not completely. "It is legal. Enough to stop any sale while the court reviews the forged transfer and the trust violation. And with the hospital records, the returned letters, and today's recording, I would not advise challenging it casually." Daniel finally looked at me. "Mom, I did not know it went that far." There it was again. Not an apology. A measurement of how much trouble he thought he was in. I remembered him at 7 years old, standing in this same dining room with chocolate on his shirt, promising he had not touched the birthday cake. Back then, his lies were small, and I could wipe them away with a dishcloth and a kiss on the forehead. This one had grown too large for a mother's softness. "You knew enough," I said. Claire turned on him then. "Daniel, say something." He looked at his wife, then at the papers, then at Noah. For the first time, he seemed to notice where his son was standing. Noah's face was not angry. That made it worse. It was disappointed in the quiet, permanent way children become when they see adults clearly. Claire reached for the property transfer paper. Martin placed his hand over it before she could touch it. "These copies stay with me," he said. "The originals are secure." I walked to the cedar box on the sideboard and took out Thomas's letter. The paper trembled slightly in my hand, but my voice did not. "Your father protected me because he knew love without paperwork can be stolen." Daniel closed his eyes. Claire had no answer. The house was silent, but this time it did not feel empty. It felt like it had finally remembered whose name it was built to shelter. The legal process did not end in one afternoon. Real justice rarely arrives like thunder. It comes in envelopes, phone calls, courthouse appointments, and signatures placed carefully beneath words you finally understand. Martin filed the notice that same week. The attempted transfer was frozen, then challenged, then declared invalid after the hospital records and notary review made the truth impossible to dress up as a misunderstanding. The medical account was traced and restored under independent management. Claire did not apologize. She explained. She blamed confusion, stress, my age, Daniel's grief, even Thomas for making everything too complicated. I listened once, in Martin's office, while she spoke for nearly 20 minutes. When she finished, I said, "You are not sorry you did it. You are sorry it had witnesses." Daniel tried to apologize in pieces over the next few months. A text message. A voicemail. A visit where he stood on the porch holding grocery bags like an offering. I did not slam the door. I also did not invite him to stay for coffee. Forgiveness, I learned, is not a dish you are required to serve while it is still burning your hands. Noah kept coming by after school. At first, he pretended he was only there to help with heavy boxes or carry groceries from the Buick. Then one Saturday, he asked if we could finish sorting the attic. We spent 3 hours up there, opening cartons Claire had marked as trash. We found Thomas's fishing license from 1998, my mother's recipe cards, Daniel's kindergarten drawings, and the quilt we had been looking for on the day everything changed. Noah shook the dust from it in the yard while the March wind pushed at the bare maple branches. "Grandpa really loved you," he said. I looked at the quilt, at the uneven blue stitches Thomas's mother had made by hand, and nodded. "Yes," I said. And he trusted me to know when love was no longer enough without truth. By summer, the rose bushes beside the porch began growing back. Not perfectly. Some branches were too old. Some cuts had gone too deep. But small green leaves appeared where I thought there would be none. I had the wedding letters placed in a simple frame and hung them in the living room, not hidden in the attic, not folded away where someone else could decide they were clutter. The house on Hawthorne Lane grew quiet again, but it was a different quiet. Not the silence of being erased. The silence of doors locked by my own hand, bills paid from accounts with my name on them, and mornings where I could drink coffee at Thomas's table without waiting for permission to belong. My husband had been gone for 6 years. But sometimes, when sunlight touched that framed letter just right, it felt like he had finally come home to defend me.